The rain hammered against the recruitment center's windows as Sarah Martinez stood in line, with dozens of other hopeful soldiers. At 19, she was smaller than most of the men around her, but her dark eyes burned with determination that had carried her through 3 years of working double shifts at a diner to save money for military training. The other recruits whispered among themselves, casting sideways glances at her worn sneakers and faded jeans. She had driven 12 hours straight from her small hometown in Nevada, surviving on gas station coffee and determination. Her father's voice echoed in her memory from their last phone call. "The military ain't no place for girls like you, Mia. You're too small, too soft." But Sarah knew something her father didn't. She had spent every weekend since she turned 16 at the local shooting range, where old Pete Morrison had taught her everything he knew about rifles. Pete was a Vietnam veteran who saw something special in the quiet girl who cleaned tables at the diner across the street. Under his guidance, Sarah had become the unofficial champion of their small town's annual shooting competition 3 years running. "Next," barked the sergeant at the processing desk. Sarah stepped forward, handing over her paperwork with steady hands despite the nervous energy coursing through her veins. The sergeant, a broad-shouldered man with graying temples, barely looked up. "Sarah Martinez, age 19, high school graduate." He flipped through her forms with practiced efficiency. "Says here you want infantry? You sure about that, sweetheart? We got plenty of desk jobs that might be more ... suitable." Behind her, several male recruits snickered. One of them, a tall guy with arms like tree trunks, muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Probably thinks Call of Duty counts as training." Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the sergeant. "I'm sure about infantry, sir. I want to serve on the front lines." The sergeant finally looked up, his expression a mixture of amusement and skepticism. "Front lines, huh? Tell me, Princess, you ever even held a real rifle? Because this ain't no video game. People die out there. I've been shooting since I was 16, sir. Rifles, pistols, whatever you need me to handle." Sarah's voice remained steady, though she could feel heat rising in her cheeks. Another recruit behind her let out a loud laugh. "Oh great, she's been plinking cans in her backyard. That'll sure help when the bullets start flying for real." The sergeant leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the entertainment. "Shooting cans is one thing, little lady. Combat is something else entirely. You sure you wouldn't rather be a medic? Or maybe work in communications? Nice, safe jobs where you won't get in anyone's way." Sarah felt the familiar fire that had driven her to work 70-hour weeks to afford this moment. It was the same fire that burned when Tommy Hendricks told her she'd never amount to anything. When her high school counselor suggested community college instead of her dreams. When her own father laughed at her military aspirations. With respect, "Sir, I didn't drive 12 hours to take a safe job. I came here to serve my country, and I believe I can do that best in infantry. I'm a good shot, I'm in excellent physical condition, and I'm not afraid of hard work or danger." The room fell silent except for the steady drumming of rain against the windows. The sergeant studied her face for a long moment, then glanced at the other recruits who were now openly smirking and whispering. "Tell you what," the sergeant said, his voice taking on a tone that made Sarah's stomach tighten. "Since you're so confident about your shooting skills, why don't we put that to the test? There's a rifle range out back. You show us what you can do, and if you impress us, we'll consider your infantry request." Sarah felt a mix of excitement and dread. This was her chance to prove herself, but she could sense this was as much about humiliating her as testing her skills. The other recruits were already moving toward the windows to get a better view, their expressions ranging from amused to outright hostile. "That sounds fair, sir. When would you like to conduct the test?" "No time like the present." The sergeant stood up, grabbing his rain jacket from a nearby hook. "Johnson," he called to one of the other staff members, "get the range set up. We got ourselves a sharpshooter here who wants to show off." As they filed outside into the cold rain, Sarah could hear the comments from the other recruits getting louder and more cruel. "This is going to be embarrassing," one said. "Someone should call an ambulance. laughed another. Girl's going to hurt herself trying to lift a real rifle. The rifle range was a simple setup with targets positioned at various distances. Sarah had shot on ranges like this before, but never with this many people watching, never with this much riding on her performance. The rain had lightened to a steady drizzle, but the wind was picking up, which would make accurate shooting more challenging. The sergeant handed her a standard military rifle, its weight familiar and comforting in her hands. These targets are set at 100, 200, and 300 yards. Most recruits struggle to hit anything past 100 on their first try. You get 10 shots. Make them count. Sarah checked the rifle's sight alignment and tested its balance. The weapon felt good in her hands, well maintained and properly zeroed. She could feel the eyes of everyone watching her, could hear their barely contained laughter and skeptical comments. Taking her position, Sarah controlled her breathing the way Pete had taught her. She blocked out the noise, the pressure, the rain beginning to fall harder again. In this moment, there was only her, the rifle, and the target downrange. Her first shot rang out across the range, and through the scope she could see she had hit center mass on the 100-yard target. A few of the laughing voices behind her quieted. Her second shot, aimed at the 200-yard target, was equally precise, but as Sarah lined up her third shot, aiming for the most distant target, she didn't notice the figure watching from the administration building's upper window. General Patricia Hawthorne had been reviewing personnel files when the commotion outside caught her attention. Now she stood perfectly still, her coffee growing cold in her hands as she watched the young woman on the range below. Sarah's third shot struck the 300-yard target dead center, and the jeering behind her stopped completely. The silence that followed was broken only by the steady patter of rain on the metal roof overhang and the distant rumble of thunder. She continued shooting with methodical precision, each shot finding its mark with an accuracy that made even the sergeant shift uncomfortably. By her 7th shot, the other recruits had stopped laughing entirely. By her 10th shot, they were staring in stunned silence at the target's downrange. "Jesus Christ," whispered one of the recruits who had been mocking her earlier. "Did she just put 10 shots in a grouping smaller than my fist at 300 yards? The sergeant lowered his binoculars slowly, his expression transformed from amusement to something approaching respect. That's some damn fine shooting, Martinez. Where the hell did you learn to shoot like that?" Sarah ejected the magazine and handed the rifle back to him, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "My mentor back home was a Marine sniper in Vietnam. He taught me that precision isn't about strength or size. It's about patience, breathing, and understanding your weapon." "Marine sniper, huh?" The sergeant's tone had shifted completely. "What was his name?" "Pete Morrison, sir. Served with the 1st Marine Division." The sergeant's eyebrows rose slightly. "I know that name. Morrison's got quite a reputation. If he trained you, then—" He trailed off, looking at Sarah with new eyes, but the demonstration wasn't over. As they prepared to head back inside, one of the larger recruits, the same one who had made the Call of Duty comment, stepped forward. His name tag read Brennan, and his face was flushed with embarrassment at being shown up by someone he'd assumed would fail spectacularly. "Lucky shots," Brennan said loudly, crossing his arms. "Bet she can't do it again under pressure. Range shooting is one thing, but what happens when someone's shooting back?" Sarah turned to face him, her expression calm despite the challenge in his voice. "I suppose we'll find out during training, won't we?" "Training's months away," Brennan replied with a sneer. "I'm talking about right now. You want to prove you belong with the real soldiers? How about we make this interesting?" The sergeant held up a hand. "Brennan, that's enough. She's proven her point. Have she, though?" Brennan's voice carried across the range. "Any farm girl can hit a stationary target when she's got all day to line up her shot. But what about moving targets? What about when she's tired, stressed, scared?" Sarah felt the familiar fire building in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. Pete had taught her that the best marksmen never let emotions affect their shooting. "What did you have in mind?" "Clay pigeons," Brennan said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Skeet shooting." Moving targets, quick reactions. You game, farm girl. Several other recruits nodded their agreement, clearly enjoying the prospect of seeing Sarah fail at something. The sergeant looked uncomfortable with the escalating situation. But before he could intervene, Sarah spoke up. Fine, but if I hit more targets than you apologize for your comments and keep your mouth shut about my qualifications for the rest of training. And if I win? Brennan asked, his grin widening. Then I'll request a transfer to communications like everyone seems to think I should. The rain had stopped, but dark clouds still rolled overhead as they set up the skeet launcher. A small crowd had gathered, including several drill instructors who had heard about the shooting demonstration. Sarah could feel their eyes on her, measuring her, judging whether she truly belonged among soldiers. Brennan went first, calling for targets with practiced ease. He was clearly experienced with skeet shooting, breaking 6 out of 10 clay pigeons with smooth, confident movements. His supporters cheered each hit, and his chest puffed out with pride as he finished his round. Beat that farm girl, he said. Handing her the shotgun with exaggerated courtesy. Sarah took the weapon, checking its balance and adjusting her stance. Skeet shooting was different from rifle work, requiring quick reflexes and the ability to track moving targets. Pete had taught her the basics, but she was far from expert level. Her first target sailed across the gray sky, and she tracked it smoothly, squeezing the trigger at the precise moment Pete had taught her. The clay pigeon exploded in a shower of orange fragments. The second target met the same fate, as did the third and fourth. By her fifth successful hit, the crowd had grown larger. Word was spreading through the recruitment center that something remarkable was happening on the range. By her eighth hit, even Brennan had stopped smirking and was watching with genuine concern. Sarah's ninth shot was her closest call. The wind had picked up again, throwing off her timing slightly. The clay pigeon flew farther than the others before her shot connected, barely clipping its edge, but still counting as a hit. As she prepared for her final shot, Sarah noticed movement in her peripheral vision. More personnel had emerged from the main building, including several officers whose uniform decorations suggested significant rank and experience. Among them was a woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, wearing the stars of a general. The 10th clay pigeon launched into the air just as a gust of wind caught it, sending it spinning erratically. Sarah tracked its movement, led it carefully, and fired. The target disintegrated completely, drawing surprise cheers from several onlookers. 9 hits out of 10. She had beaten Brennan decisively. As the crowd began to disperse, Brennan approached her with obvious reluctance. That was impressive shooting, he admitted grudgingly. I guess I owe you an apology, and I'll keep my mouth shut about your qualifications. Sarah nodded, accepting his grudging respect. But as she turned to head back to the building, she noticed the general with the silver hair hadn't moved. The older woman was studying her intently, her expression unreadable. Their eyes met across the range, and Sarah felt a strange chill run down her spine. There was something in the general's gaze that went beyond professional assessment. It was as if she was seeing something in Sarah that no one else had noticed, something that even Sarah herself didn't fully understand yet. The next morning, Sarah was halfway through her breakfast in the recruitment center cafeteria when a young corporal approached her table. The room buzzed with conversation about the previous day's shooting demonstration, and several recruits had already approached her with newfound respect. Martinez? You'll want it in the CO's office immediately, the corporal said, his expression serious. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Being called to the commanding officer's office on her second day couldn't be good news. She followed the corporal through a maze of corridors, past walls lined with military photographs and commendation plaques. The commanding officer's office was larger than Sarah had expected, with an imposing desk and an American flag in one corner. But what caught her attention was the woman standing beside the desk, the same general with silver hair who had watched her shooting demonstration. Recruit Martinez, said the CO, a colonel with kind eyes and graying temples. I'd like you to meet General Hawthorne. She has some questions for you. General Hawthorne stepped forward, her bearing radiating authority and intelligence. She was perhaps 55 years old, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. When she spoke, her voice carried the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to command. At ease, Martinez. I watched your performance yesterday with considerable interest. Tell me about your training background. Sarah straightened instinctively. Ma'am, I trained under Pete Morrison, a former Marine sniper. He worked with me for 3 years, teaching me rifle fundamentals, breathing techniques, and tactical shooting positions. Morrison. The general's expression shifted slightly. Tall man, scar across his left cheek, served in the Anho Basin? Yes, ma'am. You know him? General Hawthorne was quiet for a long moment. Our paths crossed once, many years ago. He was involved in some very specialized operations. Tell me, did he ever mention anything about advanced training programs? Elite units? Sarah searched her memory. Pete had always been somewhat secretive about his service, sharing technical knowledge freely but rarely discussing specific missions or units. He mentioned that some soldiers receive additional training beyond the normal scope, but he never went into details. He said some things were classified even decades later. The general exchanged a glance with the colonel before continuing. Martinez, your shooting demonstration yesterday was remarkable. But more than that, it showed qualities that go beyond mere marksmanship. The way you handled pressure, maintained composure under mockery, and performed when it mattered most, these are characteristics we look for in very specific roles. Ma'am? There are opportunities in the military that don't appear in standard recruitment materials. Units that handle specialized missions requiring exceptional skill, judgment, and discretion. Your mentor Morrison was familiar with such organizations. Sarah felt a flutter of excitement mixed with apprehension. What kind of organizations, ma'am? General Hawthorne walked to the window, gazing out at the training grounds where recruits were running their morning PT. Tell me, Martinez, what do you know about the Black Talons? The name meant nothing to Sarah, but something in the general's tone made her pay closer attention. I've never heard that name before. Ma'am, most people haven't. The Black Talons are a classified special operations unit that handles missions requiring precision marksmanship under the most challenging conditions imaginable. They operate in small teams, often behind enemy lines, where a single shot can mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The colonel leaned forward. General, are you suggesting that a recruit with no formal military training might be suitable for special operations consideration? What I'm suggesting, Colonel, is that exceptional talent can appear in unexpected places. Martinez displayed not just technical skill yesterday, but the mental attributes we screen for extensively in our advanced programs. The question is whether she has the dedication and intelligence to handle the training. Sarah's mind raced. This was beyond anything she had imagined when she decided to enlist. Ma'am, what would such training involve? Months of the most demanding physical and mental conditioning you can imagine. Language training, advanced tactics, survival skills, psychological preparation for operations where capture means death and failure means innocent people die. It would make basic training look like summer camp. The general turned back to face her directly. But before we go any further, I need to know something. Yesterday, when you were being mocked and challenged, what kept you going? What made you refuse to back down? Sarah thought carefully before answering. Ma'am, I've spent my whole life being told I wasn't good enough, smart enough, or strong enough for my dreams. But I know who I am and what I'm capable of. When people try to put me in a box or tell me I don't belong somewhere, it just makes me more determined to prove them wrong. And if I told you that the training I'm describing has a failure rate of over 60%, that many of the recruits who attempt it are already experienced soldiers with years of service, I'd ask when I could start, ma'am. General Hawthorne smiled for the first time since Sarah had entered the room. That's exactly what Morrison said you'd say. He called me last night after he heard about your performance from friends who still keep in touch. Apparently, he's been following your progress more closely than you realized? Sarah's eyes widened. Pete called you? He knows about this? Pete Morrison was one of the original Black Talons, back when the unit was first formed. He recommended you for consideration based on your training with him and what he's observed of your character over the years. His recommendation carries considerable weight. The implications of this revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Pete hadn't just been teaching her to shoot for recreation or competition. He had been preparing her for something far more significant than either of them had openly acknowledged. "Ma'am, if I were to accept such an opportunity, what would happen next?" "You'd complete basic training first, but under accelerated conditions with additional specialized instruction. Then, if you meet our standards, you'd be transferred to a classified facility for advanced training. The program takes 18 months, and as I mentioned, most candidates don't complete it successfully." General Hawthorne walked to her briefcase and pulled out a folder marked with security classifications that Sarah couldn't read. "This decision isn't one you need to make today. Take time to think about it. Discuss it with Morrison if you'd like, though be aware that much of what we've discussed must remain confidential regardless of your decision." Sarah stood at attention. "Ma'am, I appreciate this opportunity more than I can express. When do you need an answer?" "By the end of the week." "And Martinez?" "Yesterday you proved you could shoot accurately under pressure. If you choose this path, you'll be tested in ways that will make yesterday's challenge seem trivial. Make sure you're truly ready for that level of commitment." As Sarah left the office, her mind swirled with possibilities and questions. The path she had thought she was choosing had suddenly opened into something far more complex and demanding than she had ever imagined. That evening, Sarah sat in her small barracks room staring at the phone in her hands. It had taken 3 attempts to work up the courage to call Pete Morrison. The conversation with General Hawthorne had turned her world upside down, and she needed answers that only her mentor could provide. Well, Pete's familiar, gravelly voice came through the phone after the first ring. "I figured you'd be calling tonight. How did your meeting with the general go?" "Pete, why didn't you tell me?" Sarah's voice carried a mixture of hurt and confusion. "All those years of training, all those sessions at the range, you knew this was a possibility, didn't you?" There was a long pause before Pete responded. "Sarah, sit down and listen carefully. When I started training you 3 years ago, it wasn't because I saw a talented kid who needed guidance. It was because I saw something in you that reminded me of the best soldiers I ever served with. But I couldn't tell you that because it had to be your choice. The military had to find you, not the other way around." Sarah felt tears threatening to fall. "So everything was planned? My whole path here?" "Nothing was planned, kiddo. I just made sure you had the tools you'd need if the opportunity ever arose. The shooting skills, the mental discipline, the ability to stay calm under pressure, these are things that can be taught. But the heart of a warrior? That you either have or you don't, and you've had it since the day you walked into my gun shop. Tell me about the Black Talons." "Pete, the general said you were one of the original members." Another long pause. "The Black Talons are unlike any military unit you've heard about. We operated in places that officially didn't exist, handled situations that never made it into history books. Our mission saved lives and prevented conflicts that could have escalated into full-scale wars." "What kind of missions?" "The kind that require someone to make an impossible shot from an impossible distance under impossible conditions. The kind where failure isn't just mission failure, it's catastrophic loss of life." "We were ghosts, Sarah. We went where conventional forces couldn't go and did what conventional forces couldn't do." Sarah gripped the phone tighter. "And you think I'm capable of that?" "I know you are. But capability isn't the only consideration. The training will break you down and rebuild you into something completely different. You'll learn to kill efficiently and without hesitation, to operate alone for weeks at a time, to make life-and-death decisions with incomplete information and no backup." "That doesn't sound like the military I thought I was joining." Pete's voice softened. "It's not. Regular infantry soldiers serve their country with honor and courage, but they operate as part of a larger force. Black Talons operate in teams of 1 or 2, sometimes completely alone, often with no communication or support. It's a different kind of service entirely." Sarah walked to her small window, looking out at the other recruits who were laughing and talking in the courtyard. They seemed so young and carefree, unaware of the weight of decisions that some soldiers were asked to carry. Pete, General Hawthorne, mentioned the failure rate. What happens to people who don't make it through the training? Depends on why they fail. Physical limitations can be overcome with harder work. Mental limitations usually can't. Some people discover that they don't have the psychological makeup for that kind of warfare. Others realize that they value their humanity too much to do what the mission requires. And what about those who do make it through? They become weapons, Sarah, human weapons pointed at problems that threaten innocent people around the world. They sacrifice normal lives, normal relationships, normal everything to serve in ways that most people never know about or appreciate. Sarah sank into her chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was considering. How do I know if I'm strong enough for that? You don't? Nobody does until they're tested. But I can tell you this, in 30 years of military service, I only met a handful of people who had the combination of skills, intelligence, and character that the Black Talons require. You have all of those qualities, but the question isn't whether you can do it. The question is whether you should. What do you mean? The military needs good infantry soldiers, Sarah, thousands of them. They serve with distinction and go home to their families and build normal lives after their service. The world also needs a very small number of people willing to sacrifice normal lives to handle the darkest missions. Only you can decide which kind of soldier you want to be. Sarah stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything she had learned. Pete, if I do this, if I go down this path, what happens to the person I am now? That person becomes the foundation for the person you'll become. The values, the determination, the sense of justice that drove you to the military in the first place, those don't disappear. But they get focused into something sharper and more dangerous. You become someone who can do terrible things for good reasons. That sounds frightening. It should. Anyone who isn't frightened by that responsibility isn't fit for it. The best Black Talons I knew were people who understood the weight of what they were being asked to do and chose to carry it anyway. Sarah stood up and paced the small room. Pete, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to be completely honest. If I were your daughter, would you want me to make this choice? The silence on the other end of the phone stretched for nearly a minute. When Pete finally spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. Sarah, you are like a daughter to me. I've watched you grow from a determined teenager into a remarkable young woman. If you choose the conventional path, you'll serve with honor and build a good life afterward. If you choose the Black Talons path, you'll serve in ways that most people can't even imagine, but you'll sacrifice things that can never be replaced. That's not really an answer, because there isn't a right answer. There's only the choice that feels right to you. But I will tell you this, whatever you decide, I'll be proud of you. You've already proven yourself to be extraordinary, and that won't change regardless of which uniform you wear. As Sarah hung up the phone, she realized that Pete had given her exactly what she needed, not a decision, but the framework to make her own choice. She had 3 more days to decide whether she wanted to become a regular soldier or something else entirely. Outside her window, the other recruits were heading to evening chow, their laughter and conversation a reminder of the normal military experience she was considering leaving behind. But somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of helicopters conducting night training exercises, a reminder that there were missions and challenges beyond anything these recruits would ever face. The choice was hers, and she was beginning to understand that whatever she decided would define not just her military career, but the entire rest of her life. 6 months later, Sarah crouched in a hide site 3,000 feet above a remote valley in Eastern Europe, her breath forming small clouds in the frozen air. Through her scope, she could see the compound where intelligence reports indicated a terrorist cell was, holding 12 humanitarian aid workers hostage. The transformation from the nervous recruit who had been mocked at the rifle range seemed like a lifetime ago. The specialized training had stripped away everything soft and uncertain about her, replacing it with skills and knowledge that most soldiers never dreamed of possessing. She could field strip and reassemble her rifle blindfolded in under 2 minutes. She could remain motionless for hours while maintaining perfect awareness of her surroundings. Most importantly, she had learned to make life-and-death decisions with the calm precision that separated elite operators from regular soldiers. Her partner for this mission was Rodriguez, a former Army Ranger who had joined the Black Talons program 2 years earlier. Like Sarah, he had earned his place through exceptional performance under pressure, but his specialty was close-quarters combat and infiltration rather than long-range precision shooting. Target building is showing increased activity, Rodriguez whispered through their encrypted communication system. Looks like they're preparing to move the hostages. Sarah adjusted her scope slightly, compensating for the wind patterns she had been studying for the past 4 hours. Confirmed. I count 6 hostile targets visible through the windows. Suggest we initiate contact now before they relocate. Roger that. You take the primary targets, I'll handle extraction support. This was Sarah's first operational mission after completing her advanced training, but she felt the calm focus that had been drilled into her through months of increasingly difficult scenarios. The shots she needed to make were challenging but within her capabilities. More importantly, failure would result in innocent people dying, which provided all the motivation she needed. Her first target appeared in the window of what intelligence had identified as the main holding room. Through her scope, she could see his face clearly, could observe that he was young, maybe not much older than she was. For a moment, Pete Morrison's words echoed in her memory about the psychological burden of seeing targets as human beings, rather than mere threats, but then she saw him gesture toward someone outside her view, and she heard the muffled sounds of crying through the compound's thin walls. The target wasn't just a young man with a life and family somewhere. He was someone who had chosen to terrorize innocent people, and stopping him was worth whatever psychological cost she would have to carry. Sarah controlled her breathing, calculated her shot based on distance, wind speed, and target movement patterns, and squeezed the trigger with the same smooth precision she had demonstrated on the recruitment center range 6 months earlier. The difference was that this time, success meant that 12 aid workers would go home to their families instead of becoming casualties of international terrorism. The mission was completed successfully within 20 minutes. The hostile targets were eliminated with surgical precision, the hostages were extracted safely, and Sarah and Rodriguez disappeared into the mountain wilderness without leaving any trace of their presence. By morning, international news would report that the hostages had been rescued by unidentified special forces, and the incident would fade from public attention within days. But for Sarah, the mission marked her official transition from trainee to operational. Black Talon, as she and Rodriguez made their way to the extraction point, she realized that the person who had driven 12 hours to join the military would barely recognize the soldier she had become. 3 days later, Sarah sat in General Hawthorne's office for the first time since beginning her advanced training. The general looked exactly the same, but Sarah felt completely transformed by her experiences and her first operational mission. How do you feel about the mission, Martinez? Ma'am, it felt like everything I had trained for. The technical aspects were challenging but manageable. Other aspects were exactly what I expected based on our psychological preparation. Other aspects meaning the reality of taking human lives to protect innocent ones? Yes, ma'am. It's a weight I'll carry, but it's a weight I'm prepared to carry if it means preventing greater harm. General Hawthorne nodded approvingly. That's the response of someone who understands the moral complexity of this work without being paralyzed by it. Your performance exceeded expectations for a first mission. Thank you, ma'am. What happens now? Now you become a full Black Talon operator. You'll be assigned to specialized teams for various missions around the world. Some will be similar to what you just experienced, others will be completely different challenges. But you've proven that you have both the technical skills and the psychological strength to succeed in this role. Sarah thought about the journey from the shooting range where other recruits had mocked her to this moment where she was being welcomed into one of the military's most elite units. Ma'am, I want to thank you for seeing something in me that I didn't even know was there. I didn't see anything that wasn't already there, Martinez. I simply recognized it and provided you with the opportunity to develop it. The strength, determination, and moral clarity that make you effective as a black talon are the same. Qualities that made you stand up to mockery and prove yourself on that rifle range. Will I be able to contact Pete Morrison to let him know how the training went? Within security restrictions, yes. He's been following your progress through channels, and I think he'd be proud to know that his training formed the foundation for everything you've accomplished. As Sarah left the general's office, she reflected on how completely her life had changed since that rainy day when other recruits had laughed at her ambitions. The scared, determined teenager who had wanted to prove herself worthy of military service had evolved into a precision instrument of justice, capable of operating in the world's most dangerous places to protect innocent life. The path had been more demanding than anything she could have imagined, but it had also been more rewarding. She had become exactly the kind of soldier she had always dreamed of being, one who made a difference in ways that most people would never know or understand outside the building. Other soldiers went about their daily routines, unaware that among them walked someone who had just returned from a mission that saved 12 lives and prevented an international incident. Sarah liked it that way. The Black Talons operated in the shadows not for glory or recognition, but because their work was most effective when the world never knew they had been there. As she walked toward her quarters, Sarah pulled out her phone to call Pete Morrison. It was time to let her mentor know that the girl he had taught to shoot tin cans behind his gun shop had become exactly the kind of soldier the world needed, even if it could never thank her for it. The mockery and doubt she had faced during recruitment had forged her determination into something unbreakable. Now, when General Hawthorne spoke the name Black Talons, it included Sarah Martinez, the small-town girl who had refused to accept limitations and had earned her place among the military's most elite warriors through skill, courage, and an unshakable commitment to protecting innocent life. Sarah spent the next 3 days in a state of constant internal debate. During physical training, she found herself studying her fellow recruits, wondering if any of them had received similar offers or if she was truly unique in this opportunity. The morning runs became meditation sessions where she tried to envision both possible futures. On Wednesday morning, she made her decision. General Hawthorne's office felt different when Sarah entered this time. The general was seated behind her desk, reviewing files, and didn't look up immediately when Sarah announced herself. "Ma'am, Recruit Martinez reporting as requested." "At ease, Martinez. Have you made your decision?" Sarah stood straight, her voice clear and unwavering. "Yes, ma'am. I want to join the Black Talons program." General Hawthorne set down her files and studied Sarah's face carefully. "Tell me why." "Ma'am, I've spent my entire life feeling like I was meant for something more than what people expected of me. Regular infantry service is honorable, but it's not why I drove 12 hours to join the military. I want to serve where I can make the biggest difference, where my skills and determination can have the greatest impact." "And you understand the sacrifices this choice entails?" "I understand that I don't fully understand them yet, ma'am. But I trust that if I'm capable of the training, I'll be capable of handling those sacrifices when they come." General Hawthorne nodded slowly. "Very well. Your basic training begins tomorrow, but it won't be with the standard recruits. You'll be in a specialized program with 11 other candidates who've been selected for advanced training consideration. Only about half of you will make it through basic, and fewer still will qualify for the Black Talons program specifically." Sarah felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Other candidates, ma'am?" "Some are transfers from other branches who showed exceptional potential. Others are like you, civilians who demonstrated remarkable abilities during recruitment. One is a former Olympic shooter. Another is a decorated police sniper who lost his partner and wants to serve his country in a new way. Each brings different skills to the table." The general stood and walked to a map on the wall showing various military installations around the world. "Martinez, before we proceed, I want you to understand something about the nature of what you'll be trained to do. The Black Talons don't just shoot targets. They eliminate threats to national security and innocent life, often in situations where conventional military action would cause more harm than good. Yes, ma'am. That means you'll be trained to take human lives from distances where you can see their faces through your scope. You'll operate in countries where capture means torture and execution. You'll make decisions that affect geopolitical stability while lying in a hide site for days without moving. Are you prepared for that psychological burden? Sarah thought about Pete's words about becoming a human weapon. Ma'am, I believe that if good people aren't willing to do difficult things, then bad people will continue to hurt innocent people. If I'm capable of preventing that harm, then I have a responsibility to try. That's the right attitude, but intellectual understanding and emotional reality are very different things. The training will include psychological conditioning to help you process these realities, but ultimately, each operator must find their own way to carry the weight of their actions. General Hawthorne returned to her desk and pulled out a thick folder. Your basic training will take place at a classified facility in Virginia. You'll be there for 12 weeks, followed by 18 months of advanced training if you qualify. During this time, you'll have extremely limited contact with the outside world. What should I tell my family, ma'am? You'll tell them you've been selected for an advanced training program that requires security clearance. Beyond that, no details. This includes your mentor, Morrison. He'll understand the restrictions. The general handed Sarah the folder. These are your orders and initial briefing materials. Study them tonight, but don't discuss them with anyone. Tomorrow morning at 05:00, you'll be transported to the training facility. Bring nothing personal except essential documents. Sarah accepted the folder, feeling its weight both physically and symbolically. Ma'am, will I see the other candidates before training begins? You'll meet them during transport. Some have already been training for weeks, others are as new as you are. The program is designed to evaluate how well candidates work together despite different backgrounds and skill levels. What happens if I don't make it through the training? If you fail for physical or technical reasons, you'll be transferred to standard infantry training and serve out your enlistment normally. If you fail for psychological or security reasons, the situation becomes more complicated due to the classified nature of what you'll have learned. Sarah felt a chill at the implication. More complicated how, ma'am? Let's focus on succeeding rather than failing, shall we? But Martinez, understand that once you begin this training, there's no going back to the simple choice you faced last week. You'll either become a Black Talon, or you'll be a regular soldier who carries classified knowledge for the rest of your life. The weight of commitment settled on Sarah's shoulders like a heavy pack. I understand, ma'am. Good. One final question before you leave. In the shooting demonstration that brought you to our attention, what was going through your mind when you took that last shot at the 300-yard target? Sarah remembered the moment clearly, the wind, the pressure, the weight of everyone's expectations. I was thinking that this was my chance to prove I belonged, ma'am. That all the training and preparation Pete had given me was meant for this moment. I wasn't going to waste it. And if you had missed, then I would have asked for another chance to prove myself, ma'am. Missing one shot doesn't define a marksman's ability any more than one failure defines a person's character. General Hawthorne smiled approvingly. That's exactly the mindset that makes Black Talons different from other soldiers. Not the refusal to accept failure, but the refusal to let failure be final. Remember that attitude when the training gets difficult? As Sarah prepared to leave, General Hawthorne called out one last instruction. Martinez, tonight will be your last night as a civilian in a military uniform. Tomorrow, you begin the process of becoming something new. Get some rest and call your family if you need to say goodbye for a while. Walking back to her barracks, Sarah felt like she was floating between two worlds, the familiar one she was leaving behind and the unknown one she was about to enter. The folder in her hands contained her future, but it also contained secrets that would forever separate her from the normal life she had once imagined. That night, as she packed her few belongings and prepared for the transformation ahead, Sarah realized that the girl who had driven 12 hours to prove herself worthy of military service was about to disappear forever. In her place would emerge someone trained to operate in the shadows, to make impossible shots, and to carry burdens that most people would never understand. The journey from small-town dreamer to elite warrior was about to begin, and there would be no turning back.